Good evening. I would like to begin this evening discussing cultural beliefs and how they are developed in an individual. Culture of an individual is based on the family they grew up in, the friend group, the community, the church. The things that are impacted by culture are the foods that you eat, the language you use, the way you interact and work with members of your community and members of other communities and other cultures also. All of these things are definitive of culture. The two topics of discussion I would like to point out this evening are the first one being the legalization of physician-assisted suicide, and the second one is the harshness of punishment for perpetrators of hate crimes. I'll begin with letting you know that for my discussion on physician-assisted suicide, that I read a paper called Cultural Beliefs About Patients' Right Time to Die, an exploratory study, and I found that in the Journal of General Internal Medicine. The first finding they came across was that men and women treat this dilemma very differently, and that is attributed to gender culture, that women treat family and nurturing as a huge part of their person and their belief system, and so they base a high level of importance on the family suffering, where the men place a highest consideration on the patient suffering and the patient's readiness of acceptance of death. They also polled three different groups of Americans: Mexican Americans, African Americans, and European Americans. And Mexican Americans, they found that while they have a very religious-based culture, they attributed a lot of their considerations to God's time of choice. So they depend a lot on dependence on life support to make the decision to end a life. African Americans come from what our text has explained as a collectivist culture mostly, and so they place a high level of importance on the family level of suffering and how much the family is impacted as a whole, not just the one patient. And then European Americans, as a highly individualistic culture, place a high level of importance on the patient's actual level of suffering and the patient's readiness and acceptance of death. But they all have different situations where they believe the patient should have a right to decide. So in my opinion, coming from my family and my culture where we didn't have a huge level of religiousness, or devoutness rather, and a highly individualistic upbringing, I believe that physician-assisted suicide should be made available and protected as a right. The next topic is hate crime and the punishments enforced on it. Hate crime is a relatively new term legislatively. I read that in the genealogy of the concept of the hate crime, the cultural implications of legal innovation and social change. There is no definable hate that these crimes are committed against or under rather. However, it's a mainstream belief system that is based on prejudice. Victims are targeted based on race, color, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, and or disability. I believe that a harsher punishment would be ideal, and I also believe that a stipulation of rehabilitation should be a great exposure and even immersion in the culture to which these individuals are less tolerant. I believe that tolerance is expanded through exposure and immersion in other cultures and different ideas. So in conclusion, I do believe that the right to die should be honored and protected by law as a belief. And I do believe that hate crimes need to be treated as major offenses. Also, I believe we should push as a nation and as a culture ourselves towards a level of cultural sensitivity and acceptance that it seems to be growing and it's on an upward trend. We have a lot of political and protests and political activists right now pushing to widen the breadth of acceptance and heighten our level of tolerance and cultural sensitivity as a nation. So that is hope inspiring, and I hope it continues on the upward trend that it seems to be moving in at this point. Again, I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Thank you.